Welcome to Terramouth, where the night doesn't just hold secrets, it remembers them.
Story 1. The Ledger Beneath Lake Marrow, Ontario, Canada. When I took the winter contract at the Lake Marrow Waterworks, I thought the worst part would be the cold. A small town job, night checks, chlorine readings, pump logs, no drama. Lake Marrow sits north of Kingston, the kind of place people pass through for gas and forget. One main street, a rink, a diner, a dark lake that looks like ink once the sun drops. On my first evening, the supervisor, Ron Keller, met me at the plant gate. He was polite in the way people get when they want you to stop asking questions. "You'll do rounds at 11, 1, 3, 5, he said. "Don't skip, don't rush." He handed me a ring of keys that felt too heavy for what it opened. Then he pointed at a metal cabinet bolted to the wall beside the control room door. It had a yellow tag zip tied through the handle, like evidence. "That stays shut," he said. I asked. He kept his eyes on the floor like the concrete had answers. Old records. He moved on too fast, like the topic had teeth. Inside, the plant was clean and bright. Too bright. White tiles, white walls, white light. The pumps hummed with a steady rhythm that made you sleepy if you stared too long. The windows looked out toward the lake. At night, the water reflected nothing. It just swallowed the light. Ron showed me the basics, then the rules that were not written down. Rule 1. If the intake alarm trips after midnight, you do not go outside alone. Rule 2. If you hear the lake siren, you do not open any doors even if someone knocks. Rule 3. You check the wall clock and your phone. If they do not match, you shut off the radio and sit still until they do. He said it all in one calm breath, like it was normal safety talk. I tried to laugh. Ron's face did not change. I asked why 216. He finally looked at me. His eyes were tired. Then he left. Just like that. Truck lights fading down the road. Me alone in a building that hummed like it was alive. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. I did rounds, checked gauges, logged numbers, ate vending machine chips, watched the snow blow sideways in the security lights. But the town itself felt wrong, not hostile, controlled. People smiled, but their eyes moved past you, like they were checking what you were carrying. At the diner, the waitress asked where I was staying. When I told her, she nodded once. "Don't go walking by the lake," she said. I asked. She poured coffee and kept her voice low. Because the lake gives back what the town puts in. I thought it was local superstition. Small towns love a story. Then came the first intake alarm. M. A sharp buzz, then a red light above the intake monitor. The screen flashed a warning I had not seen in training. Intake flow reverse. That made no sense. The intake pulled water in from the lake. It did not push it out. I checked the pressure. Normal. I checked the valves. Normal. I tapped the screen like that would fix reality. The alarm stopped on its own. A minute later, the phone in the control room rang. It was an old desk phone, the kind that should not ring unless someone was calling the plant. I stared at it, then answered. All I heard was water, not a recording, not static, real water sound, like a drain far away, then a faint clicking noise like nails on glass. I hung up. The phone rang again. I did not answer. The phone stopped. The plant went back to humming, like nothing happened. I told myself it was a misread sensor, a line noise call, a glitch. I did my next round. Everything looked fine. On my way back to the control room, I noticed the yellow tagged cabinet again. It bothered me more than it should. A locked cabinet should not feel like it is watching you. I leaned close and listened. At first, nothing. Then, very faint, I heard paper shifting, like someone turning pages inside. Slow, careful. patient. I stepped back so fast I almost slipped. The cabinet was sealed. It could not have airflow. It could not have movement. I stared at the tag, at the zip tie, at the metal handle. Something inside tapped once, soft, deliberate. Not like a pipe knock, not like settling metal. It felt like a signal. I walked away. I poured coffee and forced myself to focus on my phone. I did not want to be the kind of person who believes a time can be cursed. Still, I kept watching the minutes. 2:15. The plant lights flickered once. The hum of the pumps dipped low for half a second, like the building took a breath. Then the lake siren sounded. It came from outside. A long, low note that filled the air and sank into my ribs. Not a town siren, not an emergency test. It sounded older than electricity. My first instinct was to run to the window. Then I remembered the rule. Do not open any doors. I stood in the middle of the control room, coffee trembling in my hand, and listened as the siren died away. The silence after was worse. A knock hit the front door. 3 taps. Even spacing. I froze. No one should be there. The road to the plant was unplowed at night. The town was asleep. The gate was locked. The knock came again. Same rhythm, like the person knew I was listening. Then a voice, muffled through the glass. Evan, let me in. My name, spoken like someone who knew me. I walked toward the door without deciding to. Halfway there, my stomach dropped. The voice sounded like my sister. My sister was in Toronto. She was alive. She did not even know where this plant was. The voice came again, sweeter now, like it was trying not to scare me. Please. I stopped 3 feet from the door. I could see the dark shape of someone standing there, tall, still, no shifting weight, no stamping feet, no breath fog on the glass, just a silhouette. I forced myself to look at my phone. M. I lifted my eyes to the wall clock. M. I watched for the seconds to move. They did not. The plant did not feel frozen like a power outage. It felt held, like the air had thickened into gel. The hum of the pumps softened until it sounded far away. Outside the front door, the voice changed. It dropped low, losing the softness. You already opened it once, it said. The silhouette leaned closer to the glass. The shape of a head formed, but the face did not. The darkness where features should be looked wrong, like a wet smear on a window. You don't remember, it said. The cabinet behind me tapped again. Once. Twice. Then the papers inside shifted like a storm of pages. The silhouette at the door lifted one hand. Long fingers pressed against the glass from the outside. The fingertips looked too thin, like bone wrapped in black skin. The voice became almost friendly again. Open the cabinet, Evan. Read what you signed. My throat went dry. A soft laugh came through the glass, and it sounded like water running down a drain. You did, it said. Your mother did. Your grandfather did. The siren outside began again, lower this time, like it was coming from under the lake itself. I backed away from the door, step by step, never turning my back. My foot hit the base of the cabinet. The tapping inside stopped. For one horrible second, everything was silent. Then the cabinet handle turned on its own. Slowly, like someone on the inside had found the latch. And the yellow tag, still zip-tied tight, started to stretch, as if whatever was opening the door did not care if it tore. I stood there, hands shaking, staring at the cabinet that Ron said never to open, while the thing outside the front door kept whispering my name through the glass. The zip tie snapped with a sharp crack that echoed through the control room. The cabinet door swung open. Inside were not loose papers, not old maintenance logs like Ron had claimed. Inside was a single thick ledger, bound in dark leather, swollen from moisture and age. It smelled like mold and lake water. The pages were yellowed, the edges warped, but the writing inside was neat and deliberate. Names, dates, signatures. Generation after generation of Lake Marrow residents, written in ink that had bled slightly into the paper, like it had never fully dried. I flipped the first page without meaning to. A heading ran across the top in careful block letters. Water Rights Agreement, Lake Marrow. Below it, a paragraph written in the same hand as the signatures. We acknowledge the lake's claim. We acknowledge the exchange. Clean water for the town. Memory for the lake. No refusal. No delay. Time observed. My stomach twisted. Behind me, the front door rattled softly, like someone testing its strength without urgency. "Read faster," the voice outside said. I turned another page. My grandfather's name, my mother's name, my own name. Signed, dated 18 years ago. I staggered back. The ledger felt warm now, like it had absorbed heat from my hands. The voice outside sighed, almost bored. "Your mother signed when you were a child," it said. "She wanted the boil orders to stop. She wanted the babies to stop getting sick." The siren outside deepened, no longer a warning sound but something closer to a call. The voice continued. "The lake was here first." I flipped through more pages, heart pounding. Every few years the same pattern. A new set of names, a new date. Always winter, always January. I whispered. The voice sounded pleased. "That's how long it takes to forget," it said. 16 minutes past the hour, long enough for memory to thin. The clock behind me clicked. The seconds began moving again. M became 2:17. The hum of the pumps surged back to full volume. The building exhaled. Outside, the silhouette shifted. I heard something wet slide down the glass like a hand pulling away. "You have a choice now," the voice said. The ledger pages began to flip on their own, stopping at a blank page near the back. A pen lay clipped into the spine. I had not seen it before. "You can sign again," the voice said. "Renew the exchange. Keep the water clean. Keep the town breathing." I asked. Silence stretched. The siren stopped. The air felt lighter, less pressed. I thought of the town, the diner, the rink, the kids I had seen skating on the frozen lake earlier that week. I thought of my mother, exhausted, boiling water every night, trying to keep me safe. I picked up the pen. Then I did something the ledger did not expect. I tore the page out. The ledger reacted like it was alive. The remaining pages fluttered violently. The pumps screamed. Alarms blared across the control board. Outside, the silhouette shrieked, a sound like ice cracking under pressure. I ripped another page, then another. The siren outside turned into a wail. Water surged through the intake pipes, rattling them hard enough to shake the floor. The lake pressed back, angry now, no longer patient. I ran. I bolted through the back door and did not look toward the water. Behind me, the plant lights burst one by one. Glass shattered. Metal groaned. The road was slick with ice, but I did not slow down. The siren followed me, not from one direction, but from the ground itself. By the time I reached town, people were outside, confused, frightened, holding phones that finally had service again. Behind us, Lake Marrow boiled. Not steaming, boiling. The surface churned black, coughing up debris. Old things, rusted objects, bones. By morning, the water plant was destroyed. The lake was declared contaminated beyond repair. The town was evacuated within a week. They call it an environmental collapse now. Blame old infrastructure. Blame poor oversight. Blame climate patterns. The ledger was never found. But sometimes, when I turn on a tap in a different town, far from Lake Marrow, I pause before drinking, because I swear I can still hear it sometimes. Not a siren, not a voice, just the faint sound of pages turning, waiting for someone else to sign. Story 2. The town that didn't record new births, Scotland. Blairstone does not appear in official population reports anymore. That is something I learned after I moved there. It is a small village in the Scottish Highlands, surrounded by peat bogs and low hills that swallow sound. One narrow road leads in. The same road leads out. No train station, no hospital, no mobile signal once you pass the welcome sign that still claims the population is 412. I arrived in late November for a temporary civil records job. 3 months. Archive cleanup. Digitizing old birth and death registers for the council. Easy work, good pay, remote. The first thing I noticed was that there were no children. Not one. No bikes, no toys, no chalk drawings, no prams. Every house had curtains. Every house had lights on at night. But the streets were adult only. Quiet. Careful. At the local shop, I asked the woman at the counter how many kids lived in Blairstone. She froze. I started work at the registry office the next morning. It was a stone building older than the road with thick walls and narrow windows. Inside, the air smelled of paper and dust and something faintly sweet that reminded me of old books left too close to damp. My supervisor, Mr. Calder, showed me the archives. Births in one room, deaths in another. "Start with the births," he said. "How far back?" I asked. The records went back centuries. Handwritten ledgers, ink faded to brown, careful names, dates, midwives' notes in the margins. Then I reached the year 1989. That was where the births stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Page after page after page showed nothing but ruled lines. The next birth record did not appear until 1990. One birth. A boy. Then nothing again. 1991. Blank. 1992. Blank. 1993. One girl. Then nothing. I flipped faster. The pattern continued. One birth every few years. Never more than one. Never twins. Never complications. I checked the death records. Children died. Teenagers died. Adults died. But births almost never happened. I felt cold. At lunch, I asked Mr. Calder about it. He stirred his tea too long before answering. "Blairstone is not a good place to bring new life," he said. "That's not an answer," I replied. That night, I heard singing. It came from the hills beyond the village. Low voices, slow. Not a song I recognized. It rose and fell with the wind like the land itself was humming. I looked out my window. Every house in the village had its lights off except mine. At exactly midnight, the singing stopped. The next morning, a new ledger sat on my desk. Unlabeled. Not births, not deaths. The first page read, "Arrivals not recorded by agreement." Below it was a single entry, December 1st, unnamed time unknown. Status, accepted. My hands shook. That afternoon, a woman came into the shop carrying a bundle wrapped in gray cloth. The shopkeeper did not look at it. No one else did either. The woman's face was pale. Her eyes were hollow with exhaustion. As she passed me, I heard something inside the bundle breathe. Slow, wet, and far too deep for a newborn. That night, the singing returned. Closer. And for the first time since I arrived, I understood something no one in Blairstone ever said out loud. The town did not stop recording births. The town stopped allowing them. And whatever accepted those children instead had been counting the years very carefully. The singing woke me before dawn. It was no longer distant. It was close enough that I could feel it in my chest, vibrating through the floorboards of the rented cottage. Low voices layered together, slow and deliberate, like a lullaby meant for something that did not sleep. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths until the sound faded back into the hills. When I reached the registry office that morning, Mr. Calder was already there. He stood beside my desk, hands folded behind his back, staring at the unlabeled ledger. "You read it," he said, not a question. "Yes," I replied. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he locked the office door and pulled the blinds halfway down, like light itself might interfere. "That ledger exists so the town can keep pretending it's alive," he said finally. "People live here," I said. He looked at me with something close to pity. "People endure here," he said. I opened the ledger again. More entries had appeared overnight. December 2nd. Unnamed time. Unknown status. Accepted December 3rd. Unnamed time, unknown status. Accepted. "How is this happening?" I asked. Mr. Calder shook his head. "No one writes it." My stomach dropped. The answer came from outside. A woman screamed. It cut through the village, sharp and raw. Not fear, pain, grief. Something tearing loose. Mr. Calder moved fast, grabbing his coat. "Stay inside," he said, already heading for the door. I followed anyway. The scream came from the edge of the village near the peat bogs. A small crowd had gathered, standing in a wide circle, careful not to step too close. In the center knelt the woman I had seen at the shop the day before. Her bundle lay open on the ground. It was empty. She rocked back and forth, hands pressed to her mouth, making a broken animal sound. Her partner stood a few feet away, unmoving, eyes fixed on the bog beyond her like he was watching something recede. "No tracks," someone murmured. I pushed closer. The ground near the bog was soft, dark with moisture. There were impressions there, not footprints, handprints, too large, too deep, pressed into the peat as if something had pulled itself upward from below, then slid back down, carrying weight. The woman looked up suddenly, her eyes locking onto mine. "It cried like a baby," she whispered. A low hum rose from the bog, the same sound I had heard in the hills. The crowd stepped back as one. Mr. Calder touched my arm. "I can't," I said. "The records. This isn't legal. This isn't—" He cut me off. "Every birth allowed here costs the town something. Crops fail. People disappear. Winters get longer." "The hills wanted children," he said quietly. That night I packed. I did not plan to sleep. I planned to leave before sunrise. The singing began again. This time it came from inside the village, from the houses. Windows glowed softly as people gathered in their living rooms, curtains drawn. Candles flickered behind glass. Shadows moved in slow circles, like a ritual everyone knew but never discussed. I stepped outside. The air felt heavier, damp and warm, despite the cold. The hum rose and fell, guiding movement. A procession emerged from the far end of the street. 3 men, 2 women, all carrying gray bundles. I froze. They did not look at me as they passed. Their faces were calm, resigned, like this was the final step in a long negotiation. They walked toward the bog. Against every instinct I had, I followed at a distance. The bog was alive with sound now. The peat surface rippled slightly, like breath under skin. The singing rose in volume, and something answered it from below. The people knelt. One by one, they placed the bundles on the ground. The ground opened, not splitting, not tearing, parting. Darkness widened, and from it came movement. Pale shapes, long limbs, not quite solid, not quite liquid. The bundles were taken. No struggle, no screams. The ground closed again. Silence fell. When the people stood, their faces looked lighter, relieved, years younger. As they turned back toward the village, one of the men finally looked at me. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said gently. Before I could respond, a hand grabbed my shoulder. Mr. Calder. "Run," he said. The singing surged behind us, sharper now, curious. I ran. I reached the road just as the singing broke into something else, a sound of frustration, of hunger. Behind me, the village lights went out one by one. I did not stop running until the sun rose. The next town had service, police, internet, maps. Blairstone was listed as abandoned since 1988. No registry office, no population, no records. The ledger I had taken with me was gone from my bag. In its place was a single page. My name, no date. Status, pending. I do not stay in one place long anymore. And I never ignore singing carried by the wind, because some towns don't record births. They negotiate them. And sometimes they decide you're old enough to be counted.
Story 3. The town of Millhaven never appeared on maps the way it should have. If you searched for it online, you found conflicting information. Different population numbers, different founding dates. Some maps showed it, others skipped over it entirely, as if the land itself resisted being recorded. People who lived there didn't talk about that. They didn't talk about much at all. Millhaven sat between long stretches of forest, connected to the outside world by a single two-lane road that locals jokingly called the exit. No one ever joked about where it led. You either arrived in Millhaven, or you left it behind completely, and if you were born there, you were taught early never to dig too deeply into the town's past, because Millhaven had a secret, and once every generation, that secret resurfaced. When Ethan Rowe returned to Millhaven after 13 years away, the town looked exactly the same narrow streets, the same crooked lampposts, the same houses that seemed a little too close together, as if leaning inward to listen. What unsettled him wasn't the familiarity, it was the feeling that the town had been waiting. Ethan had left Millhaven at 18, the night his older sister Clara vanished. No body, no suspects, no real investigation, just a quiet acceptance that she was gone. The town moved on faster than Ethan ever could. Now, at 31, he was back because his father had died suddenly in the old family home. Heart failure, the doctor said. But the way people avoided Ethan's eyes at the funeral suggested there was more to it. No one stayed long. They offered quick condolences, murmured rehearsed phrases, and left before the sun dipped too low. By dusk, Ethan stood alone beside his father's grave. Except he wasn't alone. He felt it then, the same sensation he remembered from childhood. The sense of being watched from everywhere and nowhere at once. Not threatening, not curious. Expectant. That night, Ethan stayed in the house he grew up in. It smelled of dust and old wood and something faintly metallic beneath it all. The power flickered constantly, never fully cutting out, just enough to remind him that the house was still aware. He slept poorly. Sometime after midnight, he woke to the sound of footsteps upstairs. Slow, measured, heavy. Ethan froze, staring at the ceiling. The footsteps crossed the hallway, stopped. Then came a sound that made his blood run cold. A familiar humming. Low, tuneless, almost gentle. It was the same melody Clara used to hum when she was nervous. Ethan bolted upright. "Clara," he whispered, hating himself for the hope in his voice. The humming stopped. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then something moved above him, again dragging this time. As if whatever walked no longer moved correctly. Ethan did not investigate. Every instinct told him not to. By morning, the house was still. Too still. No signs of disturbance. No footprints. No evidence he hadn't imagined at all, except for one thing. On the bathroom mirror, written from the inside of the steam that shouldn't have been there, were 3 words. "We remember youth." Next day, Ethan went to the town hall. If Miller had answers, they would be buried in records no one bothered to update anymore. The building itself felt wrong, too quiet, even when occupied. The floors creaked in patterns that didn't match footsteps. The clerk barely looked up when Ethan asked for missing persons records. "How far back?" she asked flatly. "All of them," Ethan said. Her hand paused mid-motion. "For what reason?" "My sister disappeared here." The clerk's eyes flicked up for the first time. Something like recognition passed through her face, then fear. "I'll see what I can find," she said quickly, already standing. "You should come back tomorrow." Ethan didn't miss the way her hands trembled. He spent the afternoon walking the town, hoping familiar places would ground him. They didn't. People watched him from windows. Conversations died as he passed. Children were pulled indoors when they saw him. More than once, someone muttered, "It's starting again." Under their breath, at the edge of town, stood the old Millhaven Reservoir, fenced off and abandoned decades ago. As kids, Ethan and Clara used to sneak there, daring each other to look into the dark water. He went there now. The water was perfectly still, too still as Ethan leaned over the railing. He noticed shapes beneath the surface, not reflections, not fish, shadows, dozens of them, suspended at different depths, unmoving, watching upward. His phone buzzed in his pocket, making him jump a text message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have come back," before Ethan could respond. The water rippled. One of the shadows rose closer to the surface, and for a split second, he saw a face beneath the water. Clara's face. Her eyes were open, and she was smiling that night. Ethan found a box hidden beneath his father's bed. Inside were old cassette tapes, each labeled with dates spanning decades. Handwritten notes accompanied them, all in his father's shaky handwriting. "They take one. It's always someone young. The town survives because of it." The final note was newer. Ethan came back. "I prayed he wouldn't. If you're reading this, it means I failed." Ethan's hands shook as he inserted the last tape into an old recorder. His father's voice crackled through the speakers, exhausted and afraid. "They don't die," the voice whispered. "They're kept beneath the town, beneath all of us. And when Millhaven needs to be renewed, they wake them." The tape ended with a sound Ethan recognized instantly. That same low, familiar humming, coming not from the recorder, but from somewhere inside the house. Ethan did not turn around. The humming drifted through the house, soft and familiar, moving slowly from room to room as if searching for him. He stood, frozen beside the recorder, heart hammering, every instinct screaming that if he acknowledged the sound, if he named it, it would become closer, realer. The humming stopped behind him. Not abruptly, politely, Ethan forced himself to move. He grabbed the box of tapes, shoved them into his bag, and stepped outside into the night. The air felt wrong, thick, damp, heavy with something that pressed against his skin. The town lights flickered as he passed, responding to his movement like nerves firing under flesh. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he couldn't stay in that house. His feet carried him toward the reservoir again. By the time he reached the fence, the humming had followed him, no longer behind, but everywhere. In the trees, in the wind, in his own chest. The water below rippled constantly now, shadows drifting closer to the surface, faces pressing upward as if the water were thinning. Ethan dropped to his knees. "Clara," he whispered. "What did they do to you?" The water parted, not splashing, dash opening. Her face emerged just beneath the surface, clearer than before. She looked exactly as she had the night she vanished. Same age, same expression, unchanged. "Not to me," she said, her voice coming from the water and his own head at the same time. "Through me." Ethan shook his head violently. "That's not possible. You grew up here," Clara replied gently. "You know better." The ground beneath him vibrated. The town itself seemed to lean toward the reservoir, buildings creaking faintly in the distance, as if Millhaven were breathing in anticipation. Clara's reflection multiplied dozens of faces now, all familiar. Missing kids, teenagers, adults, who had moved away. Their mouths opened in perfect unison. "We are the foundation," they said. Memory crashed into Ethan all at once. The festivals Millhaven never held, the businesses that never failed, the storms that always turned aside, the quiet prosperity no one questioned. The town didn't survive despite the disappearances. It survived because of them. "They keep us," Clara continued, "and we keep it alive." Ethan remembered now something his father had tried to forget. The meetings behind closed doors, the whispered discussions about cycles and renewals, the way adults watched children too closely when they reached certain ages. Millhaven didn't sacrifice at random, it chose those who belonged. Most those tied to the land, those the town could use. "And now," Clara said softly, "it's your turn." The humming grew louder, resolving into words beneath the melody, names being spoken, dates recited, promises remembered. The water rose higher, spilling over the concrete edge, soaking Ethan's shoes. "I didn't agree to this," he said desperately. Clara smiled with something like sadness. "Neither did I." Behind him, footsteps approached. Ethan turned to see the people of Millhaven emerging from the darkness. Neighbors, officials, families, faces hollow but resolute. The clerk from town hall, the diner owner, the man who'd officiated his father's funeral, Mrs. Hargreave, who used to babysit him, stepped forward. "It's easier if you don't fight it," she said. "The town remembers kindness." "You killed my sister," Ethan shouted. "No," she corrected. "We gave her purpose." Hands seized his arms. They were not rough, they were practiced. Ethan struggled, screaming, but the grip tightened as the humming swelled to a roar. The water surged forward, wrapping round his legs, his waist, his chest, cold, heavy, pulling. Clara's face was inches from his now. "I tried to warn you not to come back," she said. But the town was already hungry. As Ethan was dragged beneath the surface, he saw it beneath the water. Beneath the faces, a vast structure, not natural, not human. A network of roots and bone and something like veins, spreading outward beneath Millhaven, cradling it. The missing were not trapped inside it. They were it, their lives woven together, powering the town above, holding it steady in time. Ethan felt something tear inside him, not pain, not exactly. It was the sensation of being unwritten, memories peeling away, his future dissolving, his voice joining the hum. His final thought wasn't fear, it was understanding. Millhaven, carried on, Spring came early that year. Crops thrived. Businesses reopened. The road leading into town was repaved after decades of neglect. When people spoke of Ethan Rowe, it was briefly and without detail. He left again, they said. He never belonged here. At the reservoir, the water returned to perfect stillness. Beneath it, a new face had joined the other's, eyes open, mouth curved into a faint, peaceful smile, and deep under Millhaven, the town settled comfortably into place, strengthened by another secret finally revealed, and permanently buried. Because some small towns don't hide their secrets to protect themselves. They hide them so they can continue to exist. Story 4, The lighthouse that logged no ships. New Zealand. I went to Te Rakura to sell my dad's house. It sat on a cliff road above the Tasman, a 2-bedroom box with salt-stained windows and a view that made you forget how lonely the place was. Te Rakura was smaller than the map suggested. One dairy store, a volunteer fire shed, a pub that closed early, and a lighthouse that blinked all night like a tired eye. Dad never talked about why he retired here. He just said, the air keeps you honest. Then he died in Auckland, far from the sea. With his phone full of missed calls, he never returned. I arrived 3 days before New Year's. The town was gearing up in a quiet way. No fireworks signs, no party posters, just extra bottled water stacked outside the dairy and a new padlock on the pub's back gate at the real estate office. The agent, a thin woman named Rena, slid the papers across the desk and didn't look at me when she spoke. Sell before the 1st, she said. Why? I asked. She tapped the calendar on her wall. The dates boxed in red marker. Because after midnight on New Year's, she said, things get complicated. I laughed once, waiting for the joke to land. It didn't. Rena watched me like she was measuring how long I would keep pretending. I didn't feel the cold under her words. You're the lighthouse man's kid, she said finally. You should stay indoors on the night. And if you hear the foghorn, do not go outside. My dad worked at the lighthouse. I asked. Rena flinched at the word worked, like it was the wrong verb. He signed the logs, she corrected. That's all. Back at the house, I found the first strange thing in Dad's kitchen drawer. A thick notebook, black cover, no label. Inside, a list of dates, all New Year's Eve, going back 20 years. Each date had one line under it. Do not watch the light at 12:07. Do not answer the door after the 3rd horn. Do not step onto the road if the sea goes silent. The last entry was written in Dad's tight hand. If I fail, burn this. My throat went dry. In the hallway closet, there were 2 boxes marked lantern parts and a coil of rope that looked new. On the shelf above them was a faded orange life jacket with a name written on the strap in black marker. Callum. I did not know any Callum. That afternoon, I walked into town, mostly to stop my mind from circling. The pub was open but quiet. A few men sat at the bar, nursing pints like medicine. When I entered, the talk thinned out, then died. The bartender, a broad man with a grey beard, set a coaster down as if he'd been waiting for me. You're in the wrong week to visit, he said. I'm just sorting Dad's place, I replied. He looked at my face for too long. Then he nodded once, slow. Your dad kept the town safe, he said, even when he didn't want to. Safe from what? I asked. The bartender's eyes flicked toward the lighthouse through the window. It sat on a headland past the last houses, White tower, black railing, a clean shape against a bruised sky. "You'll see," he said, and he sounded like he hated that sentence. I left with a bad taste in my mouth. On the way back, I took the cliff path that ran toward the lighthouse, thinking I would just look at it. Tourists did that sort of thing. There were even signs with arrows and a smiling cartoon seal. But halfway there, the air changed. The wind dropped. The gulls vanished. The sea below stopped making noise, like someone had shut a door on it. The silence pressed against my ears until I felt dizzy. Then the lighthouse beam swept across the water. It was still daylight. The lamp shouldn't have been on. I froze, staring at the glass lantern room as the light rotated once, slow and deliberate, then stopped dead, aimed at the horizon like it had found something to stare at. The silence held. A shape broke the surface far out at sea. At first I thought it was a whale. Then it rose higher than any whale should. A thin, dark line climbing out of the water, like a mast, like a spine, like something standing up. My stomach rolled. The lighthouse beams snapped off. The sea sound returned at once, loud and normal, waves slapping rock. I backed away from the path and hurried home without looking back. That night, I opened Dad's laptop. No password. He never bothered with those. The desktop had one folder named Logs. Inside were scanned pages from lighthouse logbooks, each page signed at the bottom. Each entry neat and routine. Visibility, wind, cloud, vessel sightings. Except on New Year's Eve, year after year. There was always a gap. Everything was normal until 12:06. A.M. Then the ink stopped. The next line started at 12:12 a.m., as if 6 minutes had been cut out of time. Every year, in the final scanned page, the handwriting changed. It was still Dad's, but shakier, as if written by a hand that didn't fully belong to him. 12:07. Light fixed on the water. No ships logged because they are not ships. They answer to the horn. 12:07. They are closer than last year. 12:07. Callum is gone. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I had to know who Callum was. I searched Dad's email. One message thread came up, old, half deleted. Subject line, your brother, my breath caught. Brother.dad never mentioned a brother. Not once. The email was from a man named Father Keane, the parish priest in Tayro. The last readable line said, "If you do not hold the light steady at 12:07, they will come to the doors again." I sat back, heart hammering. Outside, the lighthouse began to blink, slow and steady. Even though it was only 9 p.m., then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered before. I could talk myself out of it. A man's voice, low and strained, like he was speaking through clenched teeth. "You're at his house," he said. "Yes," I managed. "Do you have the notebook?" he asked. "I do." "Good," he said. "Now listen. New Year's night at 12:07, you will want to look at the lighthouse. You will want to go outside. You will think someone you love is calling you from the road." My skin prickled. "I don't have anyone here," I said. The man gave a short sound that was not quite a laugh. "You will," he said. "And when you hear the third foghorn, you must stay inside. Lock every door. Cover every window. No matter what voice you hear." "Who is this?" I asked. There was a pause, and the line crackled like salt in a speaker. "Callum," he said. Then he whispered, almost too soft to hear, and I am not your only problem." The call ended at the exact same moment. The lighthouse beam swept across my living room wall, bright as a car headlight. Even though my curtains were closed, it held still, aimed straight at my house. I did not move. I did not breathe. Somewhere down the road, a foghorn sounded once, long and deep, even though the night was clear and the air was calm. I sat in the dark, staring at Dad's notebook on the table, and finally understood why. Rena wanted the house sold before the first, because the town was not afraid of New Year's parties. It was afraid of what arrived when the year turned, and it already knew my name. The next day passed in a blur, as if time itself had become a thing to be feared, something that was now out of my control. I spent most of it in the house, staring at the lighthouse beam flicking through the slats of the curtains, each flash like a pulse in the veins of the earth, beckoning me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, but I knew that wasn't just paranoia. There were eyes on me, eyes that had been watching for far longer than I had been aware. The strange call from Callum echoed in my ears. How could I not have known about him? How had Dad kept him a secret? And why had he been so desperate to keep the lighthouse shining at 12:07 every year? The man on the phone, Callum, had said the thing I feared most. Someone I loved would come calling. I tried to dismiss the idea, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just a passing fear. It was a premonition. The closer I got to midnight, the more unsettled I became. A part of me wanted to leave, to flee and never look back. But something, some force, was keeping me anchored in place. As night fell and the clock ticked closer to 12 o'clock, I sat in the darkened living room. The shadows seemed to lengthen around me, filling the room with an oppressive weight. I could feel the air thickening, as though the very atmosphere was preparing for something terrible to happen. The lighthouse beam swept across the windows again, brighter than ever. I could hear the faint rumbling of the foghorn in the distance. It was just a regular sound, but now it felt like a warning, a herald of what was to come. At 12 o'clock, I got up, moving slowly, cautiously toward the front door. I didn't know why I felt compelled to go outside, but I knew that the longer I stayed inside, the more I felt like the walls were closing in. The call had been clear. I had to see the lighthouse, to face whatever was coming. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I could hear the wind rustling through the trees, the faint sound of the sea in the distance. The town was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. The lighthouse beam swept across the road ahead of me, its light casting long shadows on the ground. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, as if on cue, I heard it. A voice, soft at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. "Come to the road," it said. "I'm waiting for you." The voice sounded familiar. Too familiar. My blood ran cold as I realized it was my father's voice. The same voice I'd heard 1,000 times in childhood. The same voice that had comforted me, guided me, until now. I stood frozen on the porch, staring at the road ahead. My breath came in ragged gasps. I didn't know whether to run or to stay, but I couldn't do either. The air around me seemed to shift, becoming heavier, and I felt an unexplainable pull toward the road, toward the voice. I took a step forward, then another. The lighthouse beam moved again, and I could see the figure standing at the edge of the road, just out of the light. It was tall, thin, and draped in a long coat. The figure turned slowly, and I gasped as the light hit its face. It was my father, or at least it looked like him. His face was pale, gaunt, as though he hadn't aged a day since his death. His eyes, though, were wrong. They were dark and naturally dark, as if the light couldn't penetrate them. "Dad?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What's happening? What is this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his hand and gestured for me to come closer. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like they were glued to the ground. I was rooted to the spot. The foghorns sounded again, this time much closer, deep, resounding, and then the air seemed to crackle. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, figures emerging from the mist, from the very shadows themselves. They were all around me, now tall, thin figures, their features obscured by the fog. Their eyes gleamed, just like my father's, dark as pitch. The figures closed in on me, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that these were the things that had been calling. Things that had been here long before I ever set foot in this town. The entities that had been lurking in the shadows of Tehran, waiting for their moment to claim another victim. "Don't answer the door after the third horn." The voice on the phone had warned me. The third horn sounded now, deep and foreboding, echoing through the valley like the final toll of a bell. And then I understood. The door wasn't just the physical one, it was the door to this world. The door to the darkness that had claimed my father, and now it wanted me. I turned, stumbling back toward the house, the figures closing in around me. The fog thickened, drowning out the sound of the waves, the town, even the lighthouse. My only thought was to get inside, to lock the door and keep whatever was chasing me out. As I reached the door, I heard my father's voice again, soft and chilling. "Stay with us. Come back to the light." I didn't dare look back. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it with trembling hands. But I could still hear them outside, just beyond the windows. Their whispers, their footsteps, as though they were waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to open the door. The lighthouse beam flashed through the window again, brighter this time, and with it, I heard the most terrifying sound of all, the unmistakable noise of a footstep on the porch. The door rattled, once, twice. I swallowed, forcing back the terror rising in my throat. I had no idea what I was dealing with, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let them in. Not now. Not ever. Story 5. The town of Black Hollow had an unusually high number of missing people. Not the kind that made headlines. Not children snatched in the night or tourists vanishing on highways. Black Hollow lost people. Quietly, adults, elderly, loners, people with routines. They would simply stop being seen. No police alerts, no press conferences, no funerals. Their houses were cleaned out within weeks. Their mailboxes emptied. Their names slowly stopped being used in conversation. If someone asked about them, the answer was always the same. They moved on. Black Hollow was very good at moving on. Mara Keene arrived in Black Hollow for one reason only. Her mother hadn't answered the phone in 3 weeks. That alone wasn't unusual. Her mother, Helen, was private, distant, and fiercely independent. But when Mara drove the 5 hours from the city and stood in front of her childhood home, she knew something was wrong immediately. The lawn had been cut. Her mother hated yard work. The porch light was on in the middle of the afternoon, and the front door was unlocked inside. The house was spotless. Too spotless, every surface wiped down. Every photo removed from the walls except one, a framed picture of Mara as a child, sitting alone on the coffee table like it had been deliberately left behind. Her mother's shoes were still by the door. Her purse was gone. Mara called out. No answer, but she felt it, that sensation creeping up her spine. The certainty that she wasn't alone, not being watched, being accounted for. The sheriff's office took her statement politely and efficiently. Too efficiently, Sheriff. Doyle nodded at all the right moments, asked the expected questions, and wrote nothing down. When Mara mentioned that her mother had lived in Black Hollow for 42 years without ever leaving, something flickered behind his eyes. That's a long time, he said carefully. Does that matter? Mara asked. Doyle smiled thinly. Everything matters here. When Mara asked about other missing residents, the sheriff leaned back in his chair. We don't classify them as missing, he said. They're concluded. Concluded how? They've completed their stay. Mara laughed nervously, waiting for the joke. It didn't come that night. She stayed in her mother's house. She shouldn't have. Black Hollow went quiet after dark, not peaceful but controlled. No cars passed. No insects chirped. The silence pressed in, making every sound inside the house feel too loud. At 9:17 p.m., the doorbell rang. Once. Mara froze. No one visited that late in Black Hollow. Her mother had made that clear years ago. She approached the door slowly and peered through the peephole. No one was there when she turned away. She noticed something on the wall beside the door. A small brass plaque she had never seen before. It read, Resident #1472 status. ACTIV. Her stomach dropped. She searched the house until she found more in the basement. Behind shelves that had been moved recently, she discovered a narrow metal door. Cold, industrial, nothing like the rest of the house. Behind it was a room she didn't remember. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting. A long table with folders stacked neatly. Each folder had a name. Each name belonged to someone Mara remembered from town, neighbors, teachers, friends. Every folder had the same final page stamped in red ink. Status: COMPLIT except one. Helen Keene. Status: PANDING. Mara didn't sleep. At dawn, she went door to door, pretending to ask for help, watching reactions. People smiled too quickly, closed doors too gently. One woman whispered, "You shouldn't be asking these things," before pulling her child inside at the diner. Mara noticed something else. Everyone wore a small tag, clipped to their clothing. Some were new, some were worn smooth. All had numbers. When she asked the waitress about it, the woman glanced toward the kitchen before answering. "It helps us remember our place." Place in what? The waitress's smile trembled. The town. That afternoon, Mara broke into the town records. Building what she found inside, rewrote everything she thought she knew. Black Hollow wasn't a town. It was a facility established decades ago as a long-term population stability project. The goal was simple: study how people behaved when their entire lives were contained, observed, and quietly controlled. No births without approval, no departures without review, no deaths unless authorized. People weren't allowed to leave Black Hollow. They were allowed to finish. Completion occurred when a resident became unproductive, inconvenient, resistant, or simply old. Completed residents were removed quietly, reassigned, repurposed, their existence erased to maintain stability, and every resident knew, they knew from childhood, that one day they would receive notice. A knock, a visit, a file changing from active to pending. Mara found her mother's completion date scheduled 3 nights away that evening. Mara returned home to find the porch light off. Inside, the house felt different, lighter, as if something had already left. On the kitchen table sat her mother's purse and a single note in her handwriting. If you're reading this, I ran out of time. Don't try to save me. Just don't let them keep you. Behind her, the floor creaked. A calm voice spoke from the doorway. Ms. Keene, it said kindly, your residency has been transferred. Mara turned. The man wore no uniform, just a badge and a clipboard. Welcome to Black Hollow, he continued. Let's talk about your future. Mara did not scream. She had learned already that Black Hollow did not respond to fear the way normal places did. Fear was expected. Fear was documented. Fear was part of the process. The man with the clipboard waited patiently in the doorway, as if time itself worked for him. I don't live here, Mara said carefully. I'm just visiting. He smiled, a practiced, sympathetic expression. Residency isn't about where you sleep, he replied. It's about where you're known. He stepped inside without being invited. Mara noticed then that he cast no shadow, despite the kitchen light burning overhead. Your mother was a long-term participant, he continued, flipping through the clipboard. 42 years. Excellent compliance record. Minimal resistance. She completed beautifully. Mara felt her knees weaken. Where is she? The man hesitated, just long enough to suggest the answer was unpleasant. She's still here, he said, just not in a way you'd recognize. They took Mara to the building beneath the town records office. From the outside, it looked like a storage facility, windowless, unmarked, forgettable. Inside, it descended far deeper than any municipal building should. Floors passed silently as the elevator dropped, each level colder than the last. No one spoke when the doors opened. Mara smelled antiseptic and something organic beneath it, warm, metallic, alive. The corridor stretched impossibly long, lined with identical doors. Each bore a brass plaque like the one in her mother's house. Resident hash. Numbers climbed into the thousands. Some doors were sealed shut, some were open inside. The open rooms were people, or what remained of them. Men and women sat at desks, stood at counters, lay in beds alive, breathing, eyes open. But they did not speak, did not react. Tubes ran from their bodies into machines embedded in the walls. What is this? Mara whispered. Continuation, the man replied. Completion doesn't mean termination. That would be wasteful. He led her to a larger room. At its center stood a massive, softly glowing structure, an intricate web of cables, organic matter, and pulsing nodes. It hummed gently, the same low sound Mara had felt in her chest since arriving in Black. Hollow dot faces were embedded in it, hundreds of them, thousands, some young, some old, familiar in a way that made Mara's head ache. The town wasn't being studied, it was being powered. Black Hollow existed because the people inside it were slowly drained of ambition, resistance, identity, converted into something stable, predictable, useful. Human lives are chaotic, the man explained calmly. But human routines, human compliance, those are remarkably sustainable. Mara staggered forward. One of the faces turned toward her. Her mother's face. Helen Keene's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but alive. Mara, she whispered, not with her mouth, but through the hum itself. Mara screamed then, rushing forward, hands pressing against the warm surface of the structure. "Mum, I'm Harim, getting you out." Helen's expression shifted, strained with effort. "No," she said. "Listen to me." The machines around her pulsed faster. "They don't let people leave," Helen continued, "but they let them replace." The man stiffened. "That's enough," he said sharply. Helen forced the words out. "Black Hollow needs a certain number of residents to function. When one finishes, another must take their place." Mara turned slowly. "You brought me here to replace her." The man met her gaze without shame. "You're an ideal candidate," he said. "Strong emotional ties, genetic continuity. The system adapts faster that way." Mara laughed, the sound breaking in her throat. "You think I'd agree to this?" "You already have," he replied gently. "You came looking. You asked questions. You stayed." The doors behind her closed. They gave her a choice, not freedom, just options. She could take her mother's place, become part of the system, allowing Helen's remaining consciousness to fade peacefully, or she could refuse. Refusal meant being completed immediately. Without integration, Helen's eyes filled with something like tears. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them keep you." Mara pressed her forehead against the structure, feeling her mother's warmth, her presence thinning already. "I'm so tired," Helen said. "I don't remember my own face anymore." Mara understood then. Black Hollow didn't just erase people, it waited for them to surrender. She stepped back. "I'll do it," Mara said. The man nodded approvingly. "Excellent choice." "For her," Mara continued. "Not for you." Before anyone could react, Mara lunged for the control panel embedded in the structure. She didn't know what she was pressing, only that it felt wrong to exist. All dot, the hum spiked. Alarms screamed, faces contorted in sudden awareness. The building shook violently as something long contained began to fail. "No," the man shouted. "You don't understand what you're destabilizing." Mara smiled through tears. "I understand enough." She looked at her mother one last time. Helen smiled back. "Thank you," she said. The structure collapsed inward, light imploding instead of exploding, folding in on itself like a dying star. The hum cut off abruptly. Silence. Black Hollow was evacuated by morning. Official reports cited structural instability and environmental contamination. Residents were relocated. Records sealed. The town was wiped from databases within days. Mara Keene was listed among the deceased. No body recovered years later. Travelers passed through the forest where Black Hollow once stood. There is nothing there. No buildings. No roads, just a wide clearing where the ground feels warm beneath your feet. Sometimes, if you stand there long enough, you'll feel it. A faint vibration, like a town still trying to remember itself, still waiting for new residents to finish what it started. Story 6, The Forgotten Tollbooth, USA. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd left the quiet little town of Hawthorne. 2 years since I promised myself I would never look back. But when I received the call from the lawyer saying my estranged uncle had passed away, I knew there was no escaping it. My Uncle Henry had lived on the outskirts of Hawthorne, in a house that everyone in town whispered about, but no one dared to talk about. The kind of house where strange things happened, and the townsfolk avoided it as if it were cursed. Hawthorne was a town suspended in time, a place where nothing ever seemed to change, and no one ever left. It was located just beyond the mountains, nestled between dense forests and fog-covered valleys. The only real road that connected it to the outside world was an old, winding highway. It had a history, a dark history, which people rarely discussed in public. I had spent my childhood there, but as I grew older, the place became stifling. Its mysteries weighed heavily on me, and I had to leave. But now, years later, I found myself driving down that very highway. Back to the town I thought I'd forgotten. The highway had changed since I left. There was a new layer of pavement, but it still had the same twisting curves and eerie bends that I remembered. The trees, dark and imposing, lined the road like silent sentinels. As I drove, the fog rolled in, a thick blanket that seemed to swallow up the landscape. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something waiting in the shadows. After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached the old toll booth. It stood there, just as I remembered it, perched on the edge of the highway, hidden by the overgrown trees. The booth had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. It had once been a bustling toll station, but it had been closed down after the new road was built. It was the kind of place people tried to forget. I pulled over and parked by the side of the road. The toll booth stood silently in front of me, its windows boarded up, and its structure was sagging under years of neglect. But something about it called to me, a strange compulsion I couldn't explain. I couldn't remember why, but I had always been drawn to that booth as a child. As I stepped out of the car, I felt a sudden chill, the kind that seeps deep into your bones. The fog was thicker now, and the air smelled damp, like decaying leaves. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity won over, and I walked toward the booth. The door creaked when I tried to open it. The wood was old, and the hinges were rusted, but I managed to force it open. Inside, the booth was just as I remembered it, except now it was covered in dust and cobwebs. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The old toll counter, once polished and well-kept, was now cracked and covered in grime. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, and an old light fixture hung from the ceiling, flickering weakly. I ran my hand along the counter, my fingers brushing against something cold and smooth. When I pulled my hand away, there was a faint smear of something dark on my skin. I wiped it off, but the feeling of unease grew. There was something wrong here, something I couldn't place. Suddenly, I heard a noise from outside, a rustling in the trees, like someone was moving through the underbrush. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The fog was so thick now that I could barely see a few feet in front of me. I slowly walked over to the window and peered out, but there was nothing to see. Just the fog and the trees, standing motionless like sentinels. I was about to turn away when something caught my eye. A shadow. It moved quickly past the window, just outside of my line of sight. I felt my pulse quicken. Was someone out there? I took a step back, but before I could react, I heard a voice. It was faint, almost like a whisper, but I could hear it clearly. Don't go. I spun around, but there was no one in sight. The voice had come from inside the booth. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I tried to steady my breathing. I wasn't imagining things. I had heard it clearly. Someone was here with me. I stepped back toward the door, but my foot caught on something on the floor. I glanced down to see a small metal box, half buried in the dust. I knelt down and picked it up, brushing off the dirt and grime. It was old, the kind of box you'd expect to find hidden away for years. I opened it carefully, revealing a stack of yellowed papers inside. I unfolded one of the papers and saw a list of dates. Each one was accompanied by a short, cryptic message. 1998, the toll must be paid. 2002, he came at midnight. 2010, the doors must remain locked. The dates didn't mean anything to me, but the words, they were unsettling. The toll must be paid. He came at midnight. The doors must remain locked. Who were they talking about? And why had my uncle kept this box hidden away for so long? As I read through the papers, I felt a growing sense of dread. This wasn't just an abandoned toll booth. This place, this town, had secrets. And now I was uncovering them. But I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. Just as I was about to close the box, I heard the voice again, louder this time. Leave now. I dropped the box, my heart racing, and rushed toward the door. But before I could reach it, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Someone was coming. I froze, paralyzed by fear, as the door slowly creaked open. A figure stood in the doorway, shrouded in the fog. I couldn't make out any details at first, but as the figure stepped closer, I saw him. A man dressed in an old uniform. His face was obscured by a black cap, but there was something familiar about him. Something I couldn't place. He spoke, his voice low and gravelly. You should have never come back. Who are you? I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, staring at me with a look that was both familiar and utterly foreign. His eyes, obscured by the brim of his cap, were unnervingly empty, like two dark voids that seemed to swallow up the light around him. His silence only deepened the unease growing in my chest. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and raspy, as though it had been years since he'd last used it. You shouldn't have come back. Boy, he said, his words heavy with a warning that sent a chill straight to my bones. The toll was paid long ago, but now you've reopened the door. I didn't understand what he meant, but something about the way he spoke so calmly, yet with an underlying tension sent my heart racing. My body was telling me to run, to get out of the booth, but my feet were glued to the floor. I couldn't move. The room seemed to grow smaller, suffocating me. What door? I managed to ask, my throat dry. The one you've been trying to open. He glanced at the metal box I had dropped on the floor earlier. The one your uncle tried to keep closed. But you, he paused, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or something worse. You've let it out now. Suddenly, the air shifted. The temperature plummeted, and the sound of the wind howling through the trees outside filled the silence. The man took another step toward me, and I instinctively backed away, bumping into the counter behind me. Listen, I stammered, struggling to gather my thoughts. What is it you're talking about? What's going on here? Who are you? The man didn't immediately answer. Instead, he slowly removed his cap, and for the first time, I saw his face. My stomach twisted in horror. His skin was deathly pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were sunken, with dark rings beneath them. His mouth was drawn tight, as if the years had worn him down to nothing but a hollow shell of a man. He looked ancient, older than he should have been. Considering how little time had passed since I'd last been in this town. "I'm the keeper," he said simply, almost too softly. "The keeper of what is supposed to be forgotten." He raised his hand, pointing toward the window where the fog had thickened, blurring the landscape beyond. It was almost like the fog was alive, swirling and shifting in unnatural patterns. The town was supposed to forget what happened here, what your uncle did. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper now. "But you, by returning, you've broken the seal." I didn't know what he was talking about, but the dread in my chest was growing, gnawing at me like something I couldn't escape. I looked toward the window, then back at the man, my mind racing to piece together the fragments of what he was saying. What happened here? What did my uncle do? The man's lips twisted into something like a smile, but it wasn't a smile of kindness or comfort. It was a twisted, knowing grin. Your uncle didn't just run the toll booth. He kept something out, something that was never meant to be released. And now it's coming back. His voice dropped to a low murmur. "It will come for you. It will come for everyone. And you're the reason it's been let loose." My mind was reeling. "What do you mean, it? What is coming?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned away from me, walking toward the booth's small window. He stood there for a long moment, staring into the fog, as if waiting for something. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I watched him, trying to make sense of everything he had said. This man, whoever he was connected to something dark. Something my uncle had tried to stop but had failed to protect me from. Then, without warning, the man turned back to me, his expression grim. "It's not a matter of if," he said, his voice almost distant. "It's a matter of when. And when it comes, you won't be ready." I felt a sudden, bone-deep cold settle in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the temperature in the booth that was dropping. It was the air itself, suffocating me. The silence in the booth grew heavier, pressing down on me until it felt like I couldn't breathe. Then, as if the room itself were closing in, the man spoke again, his voice cold as ice. "Get out of here, boy. While you still can. Once the fog settles, there's no going back." I didn't wait for him to say another word. My legs finally moved, and I bolted toward the door, my heart racing. The man didn't try to stop me, didn't even look at me as I ran out into the fog. But as I stumbled through the thick mist, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, something from the past. Something I wasn't supposed to remember. The fog pressed in closer around me, blinding me. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me, and the sound of my footsteps felt muffled by the thick blanket of mist. And then, just as I was about to reach the edge of the road, I heard it. A faint, distant sound. A low hum, like a foghorn, but wrong. It wasn't the comforting sound I remembered from my childhood. No, this sound was. Darker, I turned around, straining my eyes to see through the fog. But all I could make out was the outline of the toll booth, barely visible through the mist. And standing in the doorway was the man, his face twisted in a grotesque grin. His eyes locked on mine. "You shouldn't have come back," he called out, his voice carried by the wind. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned and ran, not daring to look back, not daring to breathe. But the sound of the foghorn echoed in my ears, growing louder with each step. And I knew, deep down, that whatever had been locked away in that booth was finally coming for me. Story 7. The town of Red Hollow had a rule that no one ever wrote down, but everyone followed. If someone disappeared, You did not say their name again. Not at the dinner table, not in church, not even in a whisper. People said it was about respect. Others said it was about grief. But the truth, the one buried beneath generations of silence, was far worse. Red Hollow sat between two mountain ridges. Isolated enough, the cell service faded the moment you crossed the old wooden bridge at the town's edge. Outsiders described it as peaceful, picturesque, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. They were wrong. Things happened here, all the time. They just didn't last. Evan Calder returned to Red Hollow after 15 years away, drawn back by a letter written in his mother's handwriting. She had been dead for 3 years, buried on a hill overlooking the town cemetery. The letter arrived without a return address. The paper yellowed, the ink faint but unmistakable. Come home. You were never supposed to leave. That single sentence was enough. Evan told himself it was a mistake, some cruel prank, but the pull was stronger than logic. By the time he crossed the bridge into Red Hollow, the sun was already sinking behind the mountains, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward his car. The town looked unchanged. The same diner on the corner, the same courthouse clock stuck at 6:12, the same houses, freshly painted, unnaturally perfect. What unsettled Evan most was what he didn't see. No children playing, no dogs barking, no people lingering outside. Everyone was inside, watching at the gas station. The clerk stared at Evan longer than necessary. When Evan handed over cash, the man flinched at the sound of his name spoken aloud. "You shouldn't say that here," the clerk muttered. "Say what?" Evan asked. "Your name." Evan laughed awkwardly. "Why not?" The clerk's eyes darted toward the door. "Because names have a way of reminding things." That night, Evan stayed in his childhood home. It had been cleaned recently, though no one had told him who did it. His mother's photos still lined the hallway, but something was wrong with them. Faces had been scratched out. Not violently, carefully, as if erased over time in the living room. One frame stood empty, the glass intact. The photograph gone, Evan knew whose picture had been there. His younger sister, Lily. Lily had vanished when Evan was 17. One moment she was walking home from school. The next, she was gone. No body, no witnesses. No investigation that lasted longer than a week. And then something stranger happened. People stopped mentioning her. Teachers avoided Evan's eyes. Friends pretended Lily had never existed. Even his parents grew quiet, as if speaking her name caused physical pain. When Evan finally confronted his mother back then, she had slapped him hard across the face and whispered, trembling, "Do you want them to notice us again?" That was the night Evan ran away, now standing in the silence of the house. The memory made his stomach tighten. At midnight, Evan heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, bare, familiar. "Mum." He called. The footsteps stopped. Then he heard breathing, right behind his bedroom door. Not human breathing, too steady. Too patient, Evan didn't open the door. Morning came without relief. The town felt heavier, the air thick with something unspoken. At the diner, conversations stopped when Evan entered. A woman dropped her fork when he said Lily's name out loud. An older man leaned close and whispered, "You're stirring the soil." Evan didn't understand until he visited the town records office. Birth certificates were intact. Marriage licenses neatly filed. Death records incomplete. Entire years were missing, names scratched out, pages torn away, gaps where people should have been. At the back of the room stood a locked cabinet. Its label had been peeled off, but beneath the residue, a word was carved into the wood. REMMBRRD. That night, Evan dreamed of Lily standing at the foot of his bed. Her mouth was sewn shut with black thread. Her eyes were wide, wet, begging. When he woke up, there were muddy footprints leading from his bedroom to the front door. Bare feet, child-sized. Evan began asking questions the next day. That was his second mistake. The sheriff warned him to leave. The pastor refused to pray with him. Even the diner closed early when Evan walked in, and then someone finally told him the truth. It was Mrs. Holloway, the oldest woman in town, her skin thin as paper, her voice barely above a whisper. "They don't like being remembered," she said. "They come from beneath, from the ground itself. They take people who stand out, people who are noticed, children, dreamers, anyone whose name carries weight." Evan's heart pounded. "And if we forget them, they stop," she said. Mostly, Evan realized then why Lily had been taken. She had been loud, bright, unforgettable. That night, the ground outside Evan's house began to breathe. The soil rose and fell like a living chest. Cracks split the earth, and something beneath scratched upward, responding to the sound Evan had made all day. Speaking names, remembering. The final warning came in the form of a knock at his door. 3 slow taps from underground, and Evan understood. Too late. That the town's secret was not about disappearance. It was about sacrifice and Red Hollow had not finished collecting what it was owed.
Evan did not open the door. The knocking came again, slower this time, deliberate, as if whatever was beneath the house knew patience better than hunger. The floor vibrated faintly, dust shivering down from the ceiling. Evan backed away, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it could be heard through the walls. Then the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Outside, the town lights flickered off one by one. Red Hollow sank into total darkness, save for the pale glow of the moon revealing something impossible in Evan's front yard. The ground had split open, not violently, cleanly, like skin parting under careful hands. From the emerged shapes that were not quite bodies. They were formed of packed earth and roots, faces pressed outward as if molded from the soil itself. Some had eyes, some had mouths. All of them watched the house. And then Evan saw her. Lily rose slowly from the open ground, her body intact, her clothes exactly as they had been the day she disappeared. The black thread was gone from her mouth. She smiled. "You came back," she said. Evan ran toward her before he could stop himself. The moment his foot touched the soil, hands burst from the ground and grabbed his ankles. Cold, hard, unyielding. He screamed as the earth tightened around him, pulling him down. Lily knelt beside him, her expression no longer warm. "You were never supposed to leave," she said softly. "Leaving made you remembered." The ground swallowed Evan to his waist. The figures around them leaned closer, their mouths opening in unison, whispering names, hundreds of names, spoken by Evan throughout the day. Every question he had asked, every memory he had forced back into the light. "You woke them," Lily said. "That's why they took me. I wouldn't stop shining." Evan begged, promised silence, promised forgetting. But Red Hollow did not forgive. The town had been built as a boundary, not a home. Long before roads and bridges, something lived beneath the valley. Things that fed on recognition, on identity, on being known. The townspeople learned the rules through loss. Forget the taken, or lose more. The soil reached Evan's chest. His breath came in ragged gasps. Lily touched his face one last time, her fingers cold and heavy. "They'll let the town sleep again," she said, "but only if you stay." The ground closed over Evan's mouth. By morning, Red Hollow returned to normal. The bridge still stood. The diner reopened. Children appeared again, quieter than before. Evan Calder's house stood empty, freshly cleaned, his car gone. If anyone mentioned Evan, they were gently corrected. There's never been an Evan here. In the courthouse, a new page was added to the records cabinet labeled Remembered. One more name scratched out, and beneath Red Hollow, the ground settled. Content, patient, waiting for the next voice foolish enough to speak too loudly. Because in Red Hollow, being forgotten was survival, and being remembered was a death sentence.
Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Terramouth.